Someone like you, who lacks proper education, has no right to interfere in the affairs of our esteemed family. Leave this place immediately." At that instant, I felt the strength drain from my body and a wave of dizziness washed over me. All those years I had dedicated to serving my mother-in-law. That effort shattered like fragile glass. Geeta stared at me with a glacial gaze. "Why are you so quiet? Hurry up and leave. Or are you planning to stay here watching my trembling lips?" Geeta raised her voice even further. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice? The Willis family, with all its prestige, could never be part of this house. Such audacity shows your true nature." A sharp pain pierced deep into my chest, and tears, held back for so long, began to stream down my cheeks. In the living room where relatives were gathered for the new year, I was alone, pushed aside to the margins like a stranger. The cold touch of the floor painfully reminded me how out of place I was. My husband looked away and kept his eyes fixed downwards. Even though he had been my partner for 10 years, he felt like a stranger. At this point, "I also can't forgive you for deceiving my son into marrying you. Your actions are unforgivable. And this marriage is an obvious mismatch." Geeta deliberately walked towards me with slow steps, her eyes filled with blatant disdain. The tense atmosphere was suffocating, and the cold stares of the relatives felt like needles piercing my skin. If only I had come from a more suitable background, perhaps I wouldn't have faced this humiliation. However, the 10 years I dedicated to this family were not a lie. Trembling in the corner of the room, I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a document containing shocking truths. Geeta opened the envelope with an immutable expression and read its contents. "My name is Chelsea Willis, and this is the story of how my life within the Willis family became suffocating. My first encounter with Geeta, my mother-in-law, was very harsh. The relationship was marked by a cold and tense atmosphere, but I believed that as a family, we would eventually find common ground and become closer. However, these hopes were crushed with the passage of time. Chelsea, what did you use for the soup this morning?" Geeta's sharp gaze pierced through me during breakfast. "Ah, I put in celery," I replied cautiously. But Geeta clicked her tongue in disapproval. "Celery? I suppose that's your family's flavor. But in this house, we don't use such cheap broth. Poor Ryan, having to eat such mediocre meals." My father-in-law, Lance, looked up from his newspaper with a frown, but said nothing. My husband, Ryan, also remained silent. All I could do was bow my head and murmur an apology. Geeta's criticisms didn't stop in my kitchen. She found fault with every aspect of my daily life. "Chelsea, is that skirt what you plan to wear to work?" she asked as I was getting ready in the morning. "Yes. I thought it would be practical and comfortable." Geeta let out a dramatic sigh as she looked at me. "Practical? That's just a sloppy excuse for being lazy. As the wife of a Willis, you need to dress more appropriately. Make sure you are presentable and don't embarrass us by being seen." What exactly did it mean to be the wife of a Willis? The more Geeta talked about her pride in her lineage, the more dubious it seemed to me. The claims about being servants of the samurai or having a grandfather who was a congressman sounded grandiose, but I doubted their validity. Regardless, Geeta's words didn't give her the right to constantly belittle me. Even at home, I didn't feel at peace under her watchful gaze. "Chelsea, you forgot to iron this shirt again. The women of the Willis family are never so careless. Your family raised you with such a disregard for basic manners." Every time she mentioned my upbringing, it touched a raw nerve. My parents had passed away when I was young, and I was raised by distant relatives. Geeta's words seemed to dismiss the warmth of a family I had never known. "I'm sorry. I'll fix it right away." "Don't fix it right away. Do it right from the beginning. You are a Willis wife. Act like it." 6 months after my marriage, when I finally told Ryan about Geeta's behavior, I said, "Ryan, can we talk about your mother?" He seemed uncomfortable as soon as I mentioned it. "Mom can be strict, but she doesn't mean any harm." "She doesn't mean any harm? What am I supposed to do with that?" Geeta's treatment only intensified after that, becoming particularly harsh about the fact that I hadn't had children yet. "Chelsea, why haven't you had children yet? The Willis family has always been blessed with strong men. Are you even trying?" The moment I heard her words, my heart froze. The truth was that Ryan was the one with fertility problems. A fact confirmed by the doctor. But there was no way I could tell Geeta that. "I'm sorry. We're doing the best we can," was all I could say. Geeta scoffed at my response. "Doing the best you can? Well, I'm not going to hold my breath." Despite her cruel comments, I endured it. I didn't want to jeopardize my relationship with Ryan. For me, family was something irreplaceable since I grew up as an orphan under the care of relatives. I valued this family despite its challenges. But recently I began to question Ryan's behavior. He was working late more often and coming home at odd hours. Our family finances were decreasing noticeably. These changes fueled my growing sense of unease. Still, I tried to trust him. But the combination of Geeta's relentless abuse and Ryan's indifference was slowly breaking something inside of me. How much longer could I endure this? "Chelsea, are you listening?" Her voice pulled me from my thoughts. I turned around slowly, forcing an awkward smile, and nodded. "Yes, I'm listening." But deep down, something inside of me was already crumbling. Geeta decided to organize a New Year's gathering to showcase the family lineage. She announced it during a conversation about Ryan's recent promotion. While Lance spoke about Ryan's new position, Geeta interrupted enthusiastically. "It's important to remind everyone of the greatness of our family." That day, Geeta instructed Ryan to invite all his paternal relatives. Not a single relative from Geeta's side was invited. "Geeta, won't you invite anyone from your side of the family?" She sighed dramatically as if she was annoyed by the question. "My family lives far away, and they are not the type who appreciate gatherings like this." Her words felt loaded with disdain. The day of the gathering arrived, and the house was filled with Ryan's extended family. Geeta was standing in the center of the main room, proudly displaying a family tree. Our ancestors were loyal vassals of feudal lords. This family has a noble and legendary history. As you can see, my grandfather was a congressman who greatly contributed to the development of this region. The family tree was full of unfamiliar names. Geeta meticulously described the achievements of each person, emphasizing their importance. But something about her story didn't convince me. On the far right of the family tree, a man caught my attention. It was the same surname as the in-laws of my childhood friends. That family was from the same area that Geeta claimed to be her birthplace. While Geeta continued her monologue, I couldn't shake the growing doubt from my mind. That night I approached my friend. "I'm sorry for the sudden question, but your husband's last name isn't Willis, is it?" "Yes. Why do you ask?" "It's about something my mother-in-law, Geeta, mentioned. She's claiming a family lineage that seems very similar to that of her in-laws." I briefly explained about the family tree Geeta showed and her boastful claims. "Geeta's story doesn't seem to match what I've heard about her husband's family." "That's strange. Let me check with my in-laws and I'll get back to you." Meanwhile, Ryan's behavior became increasingly suspicious. He was quite distant and often seemed about to say something only to remain silent. "Is something wrong?" I would ask gently. But he always looked away. "No, it's nothing." His phone rang more often, and he would leave the room to take calls in private, returning with a worried expression. Feeling my unease even more, I still wanted to trust him. However, Geeta continued with her relentless criticism, which worsened as the New Year's gathering approached. "Chelsea, you must learn to behave in a way that is appropriate for this distinguished family. Everything you do makes you stand out for the wrong reasons." Her words hurt me deeply. While I waited for my friend's response, time seemed to stretch unbearably. A few days later, my friend called back. "Chelsea, I checked the family records. Geeta's name doesn't appear anywhere, and there's no mention of a congressman or a feudal vassal in the records." The moment I heard this, my suspicions solidified into certainty. Geeta's proud family story was a fabrication. I asked my friend to send me copies of their family documents for verification. Once I had them in hand, I could confront Geeta with the truth. But how would I handle the consequences? As the new year approached, Geeta became even more insistent on preparing for the gathering. "Chelsea, don't do anything to embarrass this family during the event. The best contribution you can make is to stay silent in the corner." I spent sleepless nights torn between frustration and sadness. Geeta's words echoed in my mind, leaving me restless and unable to concentrate. Then another question began to torment me. What secrets was Ryan hiding on his phone? One night while he was asleep, I found myself staring at his phone, wondering if I should check it. I took a deep breath, feeling as though a crucial moment had arrived. The lies of Geeta and the secrets of Ryan. I would uncover everything. On the morning of the New Year's gathering, I sat alone at a small table in the corner of the kitchen. The air was filled with a festive aroma of traditional dishes. But I couldn't feel anything. In front of me, a variety of colorful dishes, probably all of them prepared by Geeta. I held my chopsticks in my hand but couldn't bring myself to eat a single bite. From the next room, Geeta's laughter rang out. I could hear the relatives chatting and laughing, and it was clear that Geeta was the center of attention. Honestly, Chelsea is such a useless daughter-in-law. Her shrill voice pierced through the walls, and her words cut me like a knife. She can't even handle basic household tasks correctly. What a disgrace to have someone like her in our family. My hands trembled as I gripped the chopsticks. Geeta's words echoed in my head, and I felt a sharp pain in my chest. The voices from the next room continued. Just the other day, she burned one of the dishes for this New Year's meal. Can you believe it? The relatives chuckled awkwardly at her story, their discomfort palpable even through the wall. A daughter-in-law who fails at everything she does. Ryan must have had terrible judgment to choose her. Slowly, I put down my chopsticks and crossed my trembling hands over my lap. The coldness of my fingers betrayed my struggle to suppress my emotions. Geeta's voice became sharper. Someone like her doesn't deserve to be part of this distinguished family. She should leave my son. At that moment, something inside me snapped. My vision blurred as my anger and sadness bubbled to the surface. I stood up slowly, reached into my bag, and pulled out the envelope that contained the truth. My hands trembled as I held it, and I took a deep breath before entering the next room. Geeta's face immediately soured when she saw me enter. What do you want now? The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. The lively chatter stopped and was replaced by a heavy tension. I walked to the center of the room, the envelope clenched tightly in my hand. Slowly, I placed it on the table and took a step back. This is a letter from Ryan's mistress. My voice was firm, even as my hand trembled. The room froze, and everyone stared at me in shock. I continued, unwavering. There's also a divorce agreement signed by Ryan. And one more thing, she's pregnant. Gasps and murmurs erupted from the relatives. Geeta's face turned pale as she slammed her hand on the table. That's a lie. This is absurd. But her voice trembled with desperation. It's not a lie. You can ask Ryan yourself. My voice was cold as I looked directly at her. A relative finally broke the silence, their voice uncertain. If this is true, then this is a serious matter. Geeta frantically tried to explain herself, her words coming out incoherent. Someone must have faked this. It's all lies. But the relatives' gazes became colder. Do you know why I brought this up today? I turned towards Geeta and looked her in the eye with a steady gaze. You've humiliated me time and time again. You've called me useless, unworthy, a disgrace. But I won't allow you to degrade me any further. My words felt like a declaration not only for Geeta, but for myself. The weight of her oppression lifted slightly from my shoulders as I spoke. Geeta stood frozen, unable to respond, and the room fell into an awkward silence. Once again, behind me, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor echoed. Turning around, I saw Lance, Geeta's husband, slowly rising from his seat. His expression was grave, and his movements deliberate. Geeta, his voice was low and calm, but with an undeniable authority. What are you saying, Lance? Her voice faltered, and a hint of panic seized her. Lance took a deep breath before turning to me. Chelsea, I'm sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. I've watched you suffer for too long. His words took me by surprise, and I opened my eyes a little wider. Geeta, there's something I've kept hidden for years. Geeta hardened her gaze, daring him. What are you talking about? Her voice held a mixture of suspicion and dread. I have a son with another woman. Gasps filled the room. Geeta's face turned ashen, and she staggered backward. That's a lie. It has to be. It's not. According to your logic, my infidelity would be justified if it's for the sake of protecting the family. His words were devoid of irony, and his piercing gaze didn't waver. You're no better than me. How dare you criticize me? You've hurt Chelsea much worse than I ever could. You've shamed her in front of the family, criticized her, and belittled her every move. Whatever flaws she may have, I won't stand idly by and let you continue this. Geeta's defiance collapsed under his stern gaze, and she slumped into her chair. I took a step forward and pulled another envelope from my bag. This is proof of your lies, Geeta. I placed the documents, the family tree, and the records on the table. Geeta's face contorted as she realized what they were. What is this? This is the true story of the family you've been pretending to belong to. Geeta's hand trembled as she hesitated and reached out shakily to the papers. Her eyes locked on the pages, and her expression grew increasingly panicked. Your name isn't here. Your entire story is a fabrication. Geeta's breathing became ragged, and she dropped the papers as if they were burning her. No, this can't be. Her voice broke, and for the first time, she looked genuinely broken. The room fell silent. The weight of the truth seized everyone present. The atmosphere was suffocating, save for Geeta's shallow breaths as she stared at the damning papers on the table. The relatives exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of surprise, disgust, and pity. I've had enough, said Lance, breaking the silence, firm but laced with disappointment. Your lies, your arrogance, your constant need to tear others down, it's gone too far. Lance, I only wanted to preserve our family legacy. Her voice was barely a whisper, diminishing with each word. At what cost? You've alienated Chelsea, disrespected her, and now you've humiliated yourself in front of everyone. Geeta opened her mouth to protest, but seemed to think better of it. Her gaze fell to her lap. I stood there watching the scene unfold, feeling both vindicated and empty. This was the moment I had been waiting for, a chance to expose the truth. But it felt like a Pyrrhic victory. I did so much for the good of this family. My voice cracked as I spoke, tears welling up despite my efforts to maintain composure. But now I see that my efforts were in vain. You never saw me as family, only as someone to control and dominate. Geeta's head snapped up at my words, but she didn't respond. Her eyes desperately sought support from the relatives, but she received none. Geeta, we never imagined you would sink so low, one of the older relatives finally spoke, his tone mixed with disappointment. You owe Chelsea an apology. Geeta's lips trembled, but no words came out. Lance sighed deeply and turned to me. Chelsea, you have been treated unfairly, and for that, I deeply apologize. I nodded, acknowledging his words, which could not erase years of pain. Gathering my strength, I walked towards the door. My decision is final. This is the end for me. I will no longer be part of this house. Gasps resounded through the room as my words sank in. Chelsea. Wait. Ryan, who had remained silent until now, stood up, his face pale. Don't leave. We can work this out. I turned to look at him, my expression hardened by years of disappointment. It's too late. Ryan, my voice was firm, although it faltered a bit with the weight of my emotions. I've given everything to this family, and all I've received is ridicule and neglect. I deserve something better. Ryan's shoulders slumped, and his face crumpled as he realized that there was no way to convince me to stay. Without another word, I turned around and walked out of the room, leaving behind the family that had caused me so much pain. As I stepped outside, the crisp winter air filled my lungs, and I felt biting, freeing tears running down my face. But they weren't just tears of pain, they were also tears of liberation. For the first time in years, I felt free. I walked away from the house, each step feeling both heavier and lighter at the same time. The cold wind stung my cheeks, but it also carried a sense of release. This was the first step towards reclaiming my life.